I've been looking at all the things.
Yeah. All right. So when did we last podcast? Was it the Friday night?
Well, yes, your time.
My time. Okay. I guess we will talk. Yeah, I guess we will talk about the Islanders game. I was not planning to do that, but that's fine. So give me a second. My bad. Okay.
Los Tiburones game.
Right.
Which I love that that's a thing. But even after, they've been doing that for like 10 years now, right? At least.
Yeah, something like that.
It's still awkward. it's like I really just want to be like, sir, you are a very respectable white man, and I just ask for you to stop.
Well, at least at this point, they do that different Spanish language broadcast with actual like native speakers, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I mean, I swear I must have told you that I first started watching Sharks on the Spanish channel.
No.
Yeah, no, I first had to watch ice hockey on the Spanish channel because it was the only channel we had that had hockey.
That's cool.
So it took me a while to learn the rules.
Okay. All right. So I think let me just open that. So I'm not sure how much I actually have to say about the Islanders game.
Well,
except it was a very good game.
I will have a lot to say about the line changes in the Canes game in relation to this game. Because our third line has been phenomenal. And he fucked with that.
Oh, he fucked with everything going into Canes game. Defensive pairings, all sorts of shit that he toyed with in the Nashville game. So I think it's actually a narrative
process.
Yeah, a linear narrative to get from the success of the Islanders game to the fuckery of the Carolina OT coin flip. So that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, right. Islanders game was Burns' first goal and second.
Yes. Okay, cool. So this is podcast 105. I guess other topics I think worth discussing is that Hurdle is apparently hurt.
Yep.
And he's quote unquote day to day, which of course he was quote unquote day to day when he tore up his knee in the playoffs. So that's not really informative. And I think that's probably all that I care about sort of saying about that is we don't know what the injury is, and the Sharks say it's day to day.
Yeah, but they're highly unreliable.
But yeah, day to day can mean literally day to day or year to year, the way the Sharks treat it. So, so I don't know if there's any general topic we want to touch on before we get into gameplay.
Well, I'm actually really glad that we sort of made this podcast season like the season of the coach, DeBoer.
Yeah,
because it's just set us up for this game so well. Because I'm like,
it's certainly set us up for Carolina. Yeah, I agree.
And I mean that should sort of be the focus because, as you said, he started to scramble lines in Nashville, and that comeback was just so bizarre.
Well, in that vein, I think the overall topic of DeBoer is one of talking about not just the line changes, but also the decisions to play guys certain amounts of minutes. That's because Carolina is a story of a team that came out in the first period and blew the other team off the ice, and then carrying on its habit of out shooting the opponent every game, and then all of a sudden that team just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that is not just the play decisions, but also this isn't the first time we've seen a Sharks team already this year just disappear on the away ice in the second and third period. Like, what's going on here? Is this fatigue already because your top 4 defenders are playing 20 to 24 minutes a night and your bottom 2 are playing 12, and you've got one of the deepest defensive cores in the league? Why are you doing that? And whatever. There's also a theme, I don't know where or when I will touch on it, of Erik Karlsson has been bad with the Sharks, which I don't think is fair.
No.
And maybe I'll just open up. Maybe we could just open up with that conversation.
Yeah. No. Like that's. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but for me, that's wrong on every level.
Yeah, it's wrong. It's wrong on every level.
Everything.
Yeah, it's wrong on every level. It's something that actually Kevin Kurz was getting.
Yeah, let's open up on that. I could riff on that.
He was getting into it with some of the more analytics focused guys on Twitter after the Carolina game. He essentially says that Burns has been amazing, and if you look at just point totals, Burns has been very good, but and that Karlsson has been bad, basically.
Oh my God, that's such obvious trolling. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes for a fun narrative if you're, if you aren't intellectually honest, for sure. Yeah, okay, cool.
Exactly.
So let's start with that topic. Erik Karlsson has been bad and should feel bad, and I'll throw it to you for your thoughts, and then I'll just build on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this, and then we'll just go through the games.
Well, yeah, I mean, how Karlsson's playing will let us segue easily into how the coaching has been using him and the other players. And then we'll go into the games because Carolina will be all about that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take a sip of water.
Good idea.
And are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome to episode 105 of Circling the Cup, the San Jose Sharks podcast that loves to subtweet the members of the San Jose Sharks media. I'm your host this week, Ben, because Alex is in France or something, and I'm in Oregon for the first time, which is weird. But with me from, I'm sure, sunny Sweden is Colin.
It is so dark here. It is okay. Here's a weird one for all of you in California or wherever. The other day, I woke up to walk my dogs, and I had a sunset on one side and a full moon on the other. And yeah,
that's weird. Yeah, but we're a little bit further north than we're used to, and it was getting darker earlier here too. And also, the sun is much lower in the sky than I'm used to it being. It's a little bizarre. But yeah,
like
this isn't. What's that?
Bizarre, like our coaching.
Yeah, nice segue. Yeah, so I thought I'd open before we get into this week's games, which include the Islanders game last Saturday and the Nashville game and the Carolina game. I would thought that we'd just start with an open trolling session, and I have seen in some corners of our fanosphere that Erik Karlsson has been bad as a Shark and should feel bad. So, Colin, what do you think about that?
This person has not watched the game or read the stats or is somebody who doesn't watch hockey, I think.
Well, unfortunately, I have to say that the people who making this claim have absolutely claimed to watch the games, and in fact, they're mostly using what we would call the eye test to make their claims, or using a flawed statistic like plus minus.
Here's the thing, and it's funny because I was thinking about this while watching him in the Carolina game. There's this thing about Karlsson where whenever the puck gets within 8 to 10 feet of him, suddenly he's just locked in and playing the puck. And you just see him sort of find that space amongst the play going on, but he's always playing the puck on position. And he just always seems to come up with it in these, small scrambles where they're trying to do a draw pass or something and it just gets broken up. He is magical around the puck. He's great when he has it. He just does these great moves and makes them look easy to retain possession. And most importantly for us, keep it in the zone and find that quick outlet pass to continue the cycle, which we really haven't had a defender who can do that really well. And having that player, they typically are like, third person on the puck on a goal. And so they don't get those points, but you look at their stats and they create tons of chances. And they drive possession. And these are things Karlsson does. The Sharks are better when he's on the ice in every way that we can measure that. And he is wonderful to watch. He hasn't scored yet. It is an 82-game season.
Right.
Then playoffs. Yeah,
so there's some thinking that, could be with Karlsson an injury that is holding him back. It could be, as we've, I think, predicted to begin the season that, coming into this team and learning a system and meshing with other defensemen is not an easy thing to do. Particularly, I think it might be harder to do if you are, for example, a skilled player who is expected to carry the puck and pass to your teammates, etc., and not just a guy whose one job is to come in and be a pylon. Right, to station oneself between the shot and the goal. That's easier, right, than coming in and figuring out where guys are going to be, where they like to have the passes delivered to them, etc. And I think, I'm not trying to say here myself even that Karlsson has been what I think we hope he will be for this team, because as you say, he hasn't scored yet. He's had some nice assists, particularly I think of a really couple of nice passes to guys in the slot on the power play. But I'm not trying to say that Karlsson is playing at his peak performance either. I hope he's not, because I think we expect more from a guy who has delivered for other teams more than he seems to be delivering for the Sharks. Colin, you say from your perspective, he's been very good. And I think from a lot of measures, in terms of the stuff that's hard to see on the ice, right? That, when Karlsson is on the ice, the game is tilting against the opponent. The Sharks are getting out of their zone easier. They're getting into the opponent's zone easier. They are throwing pucks at the net with in volume, etc., right? It's much easier to focus on the stuff that we tend to celebrate more, right? The fact that none of his shots had hit the back of the net. Whereas, by contrast, and particularly those who I think are focusing on, what could be wrong with Erik Karlsson, by contrast, Brent Burns has had a very good start to the season from the what we call the counting stats perspective, right?
So, real quick, to offer an idea of what might be wrong with Erik Karlsson, is what's wrong with Erik Karlsson that Vlasic is shooting too often, passing too little?
Oh, I don't know. And in fact, there certainly seems to be, from the team's perspective, a less than ideal pairing there, because we saw in the Carolina game that Karlsson dropped down to play with Dylan and Braun went back to play with Vlasic. And I'm not sure where that decision came from, right? Is it, is Karlsson less than healthy? So that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, in the sense of the minutes he ended up playing, right, in the Carolina game. But if you were not feeling particularly well, playing him fewer minutes with Dylan would certainly be a potential solution. It's just not the way things ended up on the ice. And this maybe leads to our broader topic for this week in some sense, which is really the big open question: what the fuck is Peter DeBoer doing? And there are so many ways we could examine that question. And it might seem weird for us to focus on a question like that with a team that has, if you look at the underlying metrics, performed quite well, right? The Carolina game is the first time that another team outshot them, and Carolina plays a very similar type of game and typically outshoots his opponents. So that's no demerit against the Sharks to be, to lose the coin flip there and be outshot by that team necessarily. But, in a team where it, prior to the Carolina game, had seemed to start to fire on all cylinders, or as Kevin Kurz might call it, play with jam. which really just means that they get the bounces and the pounces go in the net, and that looks like they're doing something more than they were doing. But we'll put that aside for the moment. So I guess my perspective on this is that the Sharks have played better or gotten better results over the games prior to the Carolina game. And, if you listen to me over the first couple of weeks of the podcast, I was saying basically just wait, that's going to happen, right? Because they'll get a couple games where the bounces go their way as opposed to against them, or they'll get better goalie play or whatever. But that doesn't mean that the team is being iced optimally in any way, shape, or form. Right?
All right.
How do you feel about that perspective?
See, this is going to be a boring discussion because I agree with you. And it's the frustration when you see effective things. You see good things emerging from the team. But then you look at how often we're using those things, or if those good players are being shifted into specialty roles to take a load off the top players, you find that's not true. And we can't be reaching for the same tool in every situation, because that tool is going to wear out. And in hockey, that can happen very fast. And you have arguably, a team that's probably deeper offensively than we've been in the last 2 years. We just have to figure out a fourth line.
Right.
And it's being used in this top heavy fashion, which when you have the speed of the game that's played right now, these guys just can't keep up and they can't hold up. And everyone on the top six are closer to 30 than they are to 20. So it's weird for DeBoer, who came into this team and was so good about low shifting the top guys and giving them those opportunities and really sort of trusting the depth of the team to carry you forward, has thrown all that out the window. Like I can't connect those two coaches together in my head.
Yeah, so let's actually use the Islander game as a place to talk about where things could be when this team is sort of, aside from that decision of whether Melker should be on the ice or not, which is something we'll definitely talk about. If you look at the Islanders game where the Sharks just straight dominated the opposing team start to finish, from a possession perspective, from scoring chance perspective, and all the way, and by the end of the second period had a 3-1 lead. That's a game where if you look at for example, the time on ice, which I think is my biggest criticism of DeBoer up to this point. If you look at the time on ice distribution, at least among the forwards, things look pretty good. And what I mean by that is even the fourth line is getting 13 minutes on the ice, right? Which means that your top line forwards are not playing 20 minutes. Which with the aging guys, particularly Pavelski, you don't want to see. Now, on the defensive side, you still see him leaning on Vlasic, Braun, Carlson, and Burns less so in that game, actually, at all strengths. And I'm not sure how that ended up happening, but that's probably not a bad thing. But Carlson's at 23 minutes, and Braun is at 21, and Vlasic is at 22. And honestly, I think in a game you're leading 4-1, that's not where you want to be, right?
Well, the question I have on the defensive side is, what has Ryan done wrong?
Right.
Because seriously, he's keeping up, if not carrying the play in a lot of situations when he's on the ice. I don't see, or either see in his play or see in his stats, a lot of errors, or especially not catastrophic,
right.
Interfere with your own goalie errors.
And foreshadowing.
Yeah. Come on. keep up. In keeping up is what Ryan's doing, but
right,
he's not getting shifted.
Yeah.
And we have depth we're not leaning on. And I mean, I don't know. I'd prefer your perspective on if we really have such great depth, or if there's something that's not being seen on the ice.
So great question, because and this is something after the Islanders game I posted on Twitter, is that if you look at the Sharks possession stats, even Melker is a possession positive raw, raw comparison to their opponents, which, even in a team that has outshot its opponents every game, you would expect that the fourth line versus fourth line matchup could be skewed, and our fourth line might not be particularly good, and particularly a fourth line where I don't think any of us feel Melker Karlsson has played particularly well, except maybe in special teams. That's still that's both a good thing and surprising, right?
Well, real quick, so in a stats perspective, because you said something interesting a few weeks ago where you said you didn't know if Melker is actually doing anything well or if he's just really energetic about getting to the wrong position.
Yeah, so I looked into that a little bit in the past week too, and Karlsson seems to be actually fine, effective on the PK, and the PK seems to be better this year than it was last year. And if you look at where the real weak links were on last year's penalty kill, it was really Chris Tierney, who, no surprise, he's not a particularly good defensive player, and Joel Ward, who dragged that unit down. And both those guys are gone. That's not to say that, what Karlsson brings to the penalty kill isn't utterly replaceable, if you know what I mean, right? Karlsson does visibly look very active on the penalty kill, and he doesn't seem to be a net minus on the penalty kill, at least, not to pop out in the statistics. The penalty kill is a tough situation to be in the first place, right? You expect scoring against to go up when you're on the penalty kill because you're playing at a disadvantage. What happened last year is that the Sharks were not particularly good schematically or on an underlying basis because they gave up a lot of high danger scoring chances on that penalty kill. But both Jones and Dell played out of their minds against those shots, those high danger shots, and that's the story of how that penalty kill was in the top 10. Was it like number 2 when it probably should have been middle of the pack?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, but do you see Chartier or let's say Sumela, or who else isn't really Goodrow's killing penalties, so who else is not really killing penalties on our lineup?
Well, let's again looking at the Islanders game, on which the Sharks were not on the PK very, very long. Your forwards were Pavelski, not for very long, Couture, Sorensen, Karlsson, Meyer, and Hertl. And Hertl of the forwards really got the lion's share, which makes sense because Hertl is a strong all-around player, offensively and defensively. If you look at, let's take a look at the Carolina game really quickly. Let me grab those. So if you look at that penalty kill, which also, killed every penalty that they faced, but had we spent more time on the penalty kill, you've got Suomela not on for long. You've got Kane playing a minute, which I'm not sure how I feel about Kane being on the PK, but whatever. No. Pavelski playing a minute. Couture playing about 30 seconds. Sorensen playing a full 2 minutes.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think Sorensen is a fine all-around player as well. Karlsson about 45 seconds, Meyer about 15, and Hertl down to 30 seconds, but could be that those penalties came after he re-aggravated the injury we'll talk about.
Go
ahead.
I think our third line should be killing penalties. I mean, that Scandinavian line, just whichever side is in the box, sit that guy. But you've got Suomela, who just seems to be comfortable everywhere. You've got Donskoy, who just seems like Scandinavian Couture at times. And then you've got, Sorensen, that's cute, who is just coming alive this season. Let's hope he doesn't run his knee into any LA Kings. And why aren't these guys killing penalties and I would like to see Hertl sit, actually, because we need him on offense. He is a force, and we miss him when he's not out there.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are puzzling personnel decisions made on both units, right? We continue to see Marc-Edouard Vlasic deployed on one of the PK or power play units every other game for no good reason. And I'm not sure again, that you couldn't just have Dylan play the penalty kill or Ryan play on the power play if you need to. But you only need one defenseman on each power play unit, and the Sharks have two obvious choices for that already, right? Burns and Carlson. If those were the only two defensemen who got power play minutes all year, we would be happy, I think.
And we have a selection of forwards who could fill the other defensive point slot,
right?
And you can trust them.
So just in that vein, right? Like, I think you're right that you want your penalty killers, if you can, to come from your bottom two lines, so that your top two lines can really focus on what you want them to do, which is playing in their own zone and scoring goals if you can.
Yeah.
It's clear that Donskoy is not a guy that is generally picked to go play on the penalty kill, and I don't know if that is because he's actually not good at it, or because the Sharks haven't considered it, or if it's a mistake. In other words, it's hard to say if it's a mistake or not without being able to see the statistics of it. But I'm generally with you that you should be mostly burning out on the penalty kill guys like Goodrow, who also doesn't get a lot of time on that line on the penalty kill.
He did on the Nashville game.
Okay, Skorinson, Suomela. Chartier should be getting time on that unit to see what he can do, etc. And if they don't work, they don't work. But that should be where you start, so that your dangerous offensive players are not burning themselves out in the most energy draining part of the game. I hope that we've kind of addressed your original question here. And my larger point again, that this team needs to get to the postseason healthy. This team needs to balance out the minutes. And any decision made during the game that puts more minutes on Vlasic, puts more minutes on either Burns or Carlson, really, puts more minutes on Pavelski, puts more minutes on Jumbo when he comes back, puts more minutes on Couture. These guys are getting a little older, is a poor choice.
Okay, so if you were to protect, let's say, two forwards and two defensemen who just don't do penalty killing, who would those be?
I probably would save Kane. And I probably would save Pavelski.
Yep.
And on the defense, no PK time?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Again, I know that people disagree with this, but I don't think I would make Vlasic play on the PK because he's you're going to have lots of situations at even strength where you need him to shut down the opponent's top lines, and so save his energy.
Okay.
And I probably wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't put Braun on the PK because he's just slow and old at this point. In general. Which does mean, of course, that Burns and Carlson are going to have to play on both units. And I don't have a problem with that because you want, in my opinion, in the modern NHL, you want defensemen who can get possession and move the puck out of the zone in whatever way possible.
Yeah.
In whatever situation. So, and that's again, maybe as I think deeper about it out loud, why I say Vlasic probably shouldn't be on the PK is because that's not his game. His game is to get possession of the puck and then find a way to get that to somebody to get it out.
Okay.
Right.
That surprises me. I would not have thought.
Well, it's not orthodoxy, right? And
yeah.
It's not hockey orthodoxy to say any of those things, but the thing is that the NHL is changing, and there's absolutely a more of an emphasis on defensemen who aren't pylons anymore, right?
Well, but to that point, I think Vlasic, like, being a penalty killer these days is a bit less rough of a job. Like,
sure.
It's gotten a lot more about, skill and speed and space
and mobility.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like, we have so many players that have brilliant stick use in the defensive zone and just knock pucks free and, get a rush going, that we kind of forget that one of our best is Vlasic. And having a stick that smart makes sense to me on the penalty kill. Like, that seems to be the perfect environment for him.
he's not bad at it. Again, what I'm sort of talking about here isn't just who's best at the job, but how you manage their energy through a long year.
But isn't the penalty kill supposed to mitigate the opposing team's highest percentage chance to score a goal? You're supposed to you need to put the players out there that bring that peak down.
I mean, if that's true, then load up your top lines. They're your best players. Right? No, it's not that. I don't think it's that simple. Is my point, Colin. And I think that your job as a special teams coach with the penalty kill is to put the guys out there that can do the job as much as possible without also costing you the rest of the game, if that makes sense, right?
Sure.
And if you have defensemen who can do a serviceable job, and the Sharks have the defensive, if our defense was Marc-Edouard Vlasic and 5 terrible players, then yes, Vlasic should be on the penalty kill. Well, and that's that. But that's not the situation the Sharks are in.
Sure. Here's something we can probably agree on. How much specialty teams minutes did Ryan skate this week?
0. I mean,
yeah, none.
Right.
Absolutely none. I mean, that seems ridiculous.
It's utterly ridiculous. I mean, and again, all of this comes down to get back to our broader topic, Peter DeBoer, and how he allocates time based on probably trust rather than effectiveness or long-term thinking or anything that is important for where the Sharks will be 4 months from now.
All right. So with the idea of long-term thinking, because I feel these 3 games sort of plot a possible storyline for DeBoer, 3 points plot a line, and we can start to see maybe how DeBoer's going to do it. Right. So with these games, maybe we can get through and look at somebody specifically, Chartier.
Yeah. Rourke. Yeah. So in that vein, again, my sort of premise here is that the Islanders game was as ideal as you get as to what the Sharks probably should look like this year in the terms of time on ice distribution, in terms of dominance of an opponent. But the larger point here is that what we see in terms of minute distribution in this game is what minute distribution should be regardless of your lead. In this, in the sense that we see this distribution again, I think largely because the Sharks were up 3-1, and so DeBoer stopped quote unquote coaching and just rolled the lines.
Except you would want to see Pavelski's 2 penalty minutes getting split between Suomela and Chartier.
Absolutely. Ideally, I would see slightly different personnel deployment on the special teams units. Right. A separate topic is who does DeBoer trust? Who does he put in these situations, and how does that affect overall play decisions? I mean, again, he allegedly trusts Melker Karlsson as a penalty killer, but again, you don't see Karlsson getting the most minutes on that unit. So why is he playing?
Well, but I think, like I said earlier, either in chat or before we started recording, I think Karlsson is just that object that fits every hole. He's spackle putty.
He's a multi-tool.
You just rub some Karlsson over it, and it'll hold for now. And I agree. We have so many other people who could do this.
Yes.
And that we're not even looking at them is troubling. And that when we do see them there, like when we do see Sorensen on the penalty kill, he does well.
Yeah.
But then he disappears.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think what we see is experimentation in the special teams still, right? That the team hasn't actually settled on these units. It hasn't actually settled on guys who should be getting the most minutes. It's a game-to-game experimentation. Let's try, Suomela for a minute. Okay, this game, let's try Hurdle for more time. Or, and it could be, you'd have to go back and watch tape. It could be that they're putting the guy out there they trust the most who also hasn't played a shift in the few minutes before, and hence that's why a guy like Hurdle gets 2 minutes one game and 30 seconds. I don't know. Like, you could really go crazy rewatching these games and charting this stuff, and I haven't done that, right? But with that said, if you just look at the step back and again, look at the Islanders game as a great example of the Sharks firing on all cylinders against a bad team and having their way with them and doing that in all phases of the game and having a successful, successful power play performance, even without goals on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
That this is probably a template for what the Sharks should look like, except that when you want to see if somebody else, who's riding along with the team on the bench and not getting a lot of minutes should come in and play, and you're looking at who should step out, Chartier across the win streak had looked very good to me. And if you look at the possession stats, he's been better than either Carlson or Goodrow.
Well, so one of the things that we started talking about before we got into this podcast was, is Chartier basically practicing the role that he's going to have for the foreseeable future where he's a Shark? Because this is the role that he is intended by the franchise level intended to fill.
I think so, except they also, I think that because they're carrying Gambrell with them, that the organization isn't sure which of these guys should be getting this opportunity. And Chartier and Gambrell are both centers, but they are differently built players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Gambrell is certainly the player who is built more like the center that DeBoer has always wanted on that fourth line because he's bigger. That doesn't mean he's better, but Chartier has come in and he's played, and I felt he's played very well in that fourth line, particularly when again, that line is actually blowing out its fourth line opponents game to game. Possession-wise, they're not scoring, but you don't need your fourth line to score. You just need to prevent the other fourth line from scoring. And beyond that, you need to see how he does on the PK, because that's where you want your PK minutes coming from. And he hasn't gotten a ton of opportunity to do that.
So one thing, like on the size topic, because that always just sort of comes up, and it's like, well, he's not big enough. Boo-hoo, that's the end of it. But the point of size, the point of desiring a bigger player is you assume that they're going to play more physical, that they're going to be more of a disruptive force for the other team.
Which has dubious value, I'm just going to say.
Gambrell plays in this last game, no recorded hits by the NHL page. And Chartier has, on average, 3 hits in this week. So, 3 hits a game.
Right.
He is, to me, Chartier is a player that you see him, and I'm like, he's the fourth line center. He has a role to play. His role is to get out there, create energy, create disruption, create momentum for the guy behind me to pick up on and carry forward. And he does that. He's doing his job. And Gambrell went out there and he looked like a guy trying to play hockey. And I feel like DeBoer is so fixated on pure raw height. He's not looking at actual production.
Right. And that's sort of my point. Like, we've been saying for the 3 years that we've been watching this team that DeBoer has a template within which he wants each of his lines to fit, if you know what I mean. Right. And by that, I mean that the top line is your scoring line. The second line is sort of a Swiss Army knife line. The third line would be your traditional checking line. And he's just sort of lucky that third line includes guys who actually can score as well. So Mela, Donskoy, and whoever ends up on their wing when, health comes into play. Right. And then for him, the fourth line is a grind line, and it always has been. Right. By grind line, obviously we mean hit something, and it doesn't really matter what you do other than that.
I wonder if DeBoer has just a large room somewhere where he has actual cardboard cutouts of skaters that he just sort of positions in the room on his lines, and that's why Chartier is not getting ice time. It's just like, no, I know what you're supposed to look like, and my fourth line cutout, you don't match. So
I don't want to be too up to this point. I don't want to be too down on DeBoer in terms of at least giving Chartier an opportunity, because he could have gone with Gambrell from the start, even though Chartier had a better training camp. Mm-hmm. And Chartier has acquitted himself, I think, in these games. So the Islanders game aside, let's just quick summary this and then transition, because the Chartier Gambrell playing decision hadn't happened yet by this point. So again,
Chartier had a good game.
Yeah, Chartier had an excellent game in a run of excellent games. The entire team had an excellent game. They straight dominated, and goals. Let's see. I think from Burns had one or two here.
Meyer, right? Donskoy, Burns, and Couture.
Okay, right. Burns had one. Mm-hmm. So I don't have too much to say about any of those individual goals, because this game happened over a week ago at this point. Just to say that, I think this game is what we hoped to see from the Sharks on home ice when they played a bad team. And everything went their way. Shots, scoring chances. They did a really good job of getting into the danger areas and getting shots on goal, and pucks went in. Hooray. Pretty much all I had to say about that.
The important thing to carry from this game is Hertl appears on almost every goal.
Yeah, Hertl had a great game, absolutely. So then what we were really waiting for this week, I think, was for the Sharks to end up playing a very good team and playing a very good team on the road, because up to this point, the Sharks had a single road trip, not looked particularly good on that road trip, but come home and started to practice and started to play very well. So this was, I think, a very good test for this Sharks team, where it's at. The Predators are not a high event team. They seem to be succeeding largely by playing the way that the DeBoer Sharks played that first year, of sort of minimizing really dangerous events on one side and capitalizing from your few dangerous events on your own end. Yep. And I feel like we did see that that style of Predators game, essentially. I don't think the Sharks solved them largely, at least not until the third period.
Right? Oh, man. I mean, yeah, at least not until Dylan went end to end. Right. And, I mean, I still can't believe it happened. I mean, I see replays of that, and I still can't believe Dylan went end to end against the Predators.
Well, so let's talk about this game in general, because the Sharks actually probably could have gone home and just let this game end up the way it was, given the way it started. So the Sharks did open the scoring, but then they were down 2-1 very quickly into the second period. They came back in and sort of took control of play for a bit, and tied it up, and then quickly went down 4-2 by the end of the second period. And this was not an unfamiliar way for Sharks road games to go this year so far. What really made this game different is what the Sharks showed in the third period.
Yeah,
here on the road against Nashville. Now, again, that's not to say that the Sharks were able to get into high danger areas very effectively against Nashville. They weren't, but what they were able to do is draw some penalties, and then capitalize on those penalties.
Mm-hmm. And just it seemed like just pick up the pace and control the play. So when my favorite eye test is you sort of look away, look back, and go, if I don't look at the actual scoreboard, are we on a penalty kill or are we on a power play?
Right.
And if you see your team playing in such a way, it's like, yeah, we're on a power play. Oh wait, no, we're just kicking ass. We just sort of went on a 5 versus 5 power play for a while, and that's what you always want to see, and that's what you want to see this team do, because then they just start racking up really dangerous chances and rebounds and hopefully goals.
So one thing that I think was concerning to me, even though the Sharks came back and pulled out this game, and got a beautiful power play goal to kind of, I think it was the drawing even goal where we finally saw Brent Burns firing from the OV spot.
Yep.
And then, we're able to get that fifth goal, and then defend the lead long enough to take this game home. I think what was concerning to me in this game, regardless, was, again, Martin Jones's play. How did you feel about Jones in this game?
I feel like Jones is he's not playing in his form where you see, him go one-on-one with Victor Arvidsson and you feel confident, oh yeah, he's got this. You kind of, you actually do think that. You think, oh yeah, he's got this, but you're just not thinking of Jones. Because
ouch.
I mean, for how we know he can play, I feel like he's kind of asleep right now.
He's a sub 900 goalie right now. His save percentage is 899,
which is abysmal. I mean,
yeah.
Like if he was an up and coming goaltender, like let's say he was a hot rookie sensation, that would be back to the AHL.
Right.
That'd be back to the Barracuda.
If he wasn't being paid $6 million a year to play AHL quality goal,
or that,
yeah.
And I mean, especially when you have somebody like Dell behind you, somebody who can step up and do the job.
We hope,
yeah. So I don't think the Sharks won this because of Jones.
No, absolutely not.
I think there were.
They won this game in spite of Jones.
Sure, but I think there are also times that Jones was put into a situation that he shouldn't have.
Sure.
If you play the game well against Nashville and you're, intelligent how you're playing against a team that uses its weapons very well, you never let Victor Arvidsson get one-on-one with your goaltender.
Agree. I mean, the Sharks have been shaky defensively the entire year, period. And they've put Jones in tough spots. But on the same token, like the Sharks force, you see over and over again, the Sharks force other teams' goalies to defend in one-on-one situations, and you don't see the same result,
Yep.
And I don't think that is entirely about the Sharks' lack of shooting prowess per se, because I'm pretty, the Sharks are largely, especially after the first week of the year when, pucks were just not going in for them, they're pretty close, I think, to league average, at least in terms of shooting percentage. And also some of that shooting percentage is drawn down because the Sharks essentially are shooting from everywhere, right? They're shooting from great spots. They're shooting from middling spots, and they occasionally throw shots on net from bad spots. They like to shoot. That's not a bad thing. And it will draw down your shooting percentage. But you'll see a guy like Couture or Hurdle go in and put a great move on a goalie, and that goalie makes a stop, and Jones does not right now typically make that stop, and that's a problem.
Well, and okay, so I absolutely agree, but I think there's also the thing where we don't see the other team's player get one-on-one with Jones, and then an amazing, defensive diving stick save by the trailing defender. Like, we're just sort of loose and sloppy in defense, and we're not being saved by the last player. So we have to step it up on the scoreboard, and we have to just, play this really great possession play that we're playing, both, in the offensive zone and also just transitioning back or, forcing the other team to dump it out so that we can reset, because that's still possession.
This is kind of my version of the eye test complaint. But, I think it's safe to say that, Jones is being left hung out to dry occasionally, and occasionally a guy just makes a great shot on him. But typically we've seen, and this has been a theme for us for 2 or 3 years here, that Jones will give up a soft goal a game.
Yep.
Right? Do you typically feel like the Sharks' opponents are giving up a soft goal a game?
Well, no, not on average.
Right.
However, I feel like we we try to set up certain shots with a plan, specifically the slap into the slot deflection. I don't feel like we have a plan for all the other times we're shooting. So I feel a lot of time it's just sort of shoot away, and we end up putting a lot of shots into their team's chest. Mm-hmm. And like, we don't shoot hard and low for rebounds, for pad rebounds. We don't see a habit of, trying to shoot cross the front of the goal,
right,
to generate skate rebounds or stick rebounds. We just, all our guys seem to shoot slightly differently and seem to just sort of shoot away. So I don't think we have the complete coach plan, or at least we're not coaching into a plan or a system that I think other teams are doing.
Sure. So let's also then, in looking at this game where the Sharks did pull out a win and they did dominate the third period, which, when a team is behind, you see this a lot where, it's so much that it has a term, score effects, right? The other team typically does start to dominate possession. And with this game, it's hard to say whether the Sharks truly dominated that third period, or Nashville sort of sat back and prayed that the Sharks wouldn't be able to solve their goalie. I didn't feel like that Nashville particularly sat back, but you can't separate these when you look at the stats. A game where you see score effects, and one time it's because a team just picked it up, and another time it's because a team went into shell. You can't really pick that up, so who knows? But what I want to complain about here is the difference in playing time distribution we saw between this game and the Islanders game, because this was a game where the Sharks, run the risk of burning out their stars, because they play Suomela for less than 10 minutes in all situations. They play Goodrow for less than 10 minutes in all situations. They play, Burns and Carlson about what you'd expect, but Kane for 19. Ryan only gets 10. Pabs is up to 19 and a half.
10
Chartier is under 10. And Timo Meyer and Hurdle are up in the 18s. Now, if you're going to play a guy 18 minutes a night, I'm not going to complain about it being a Meyer or Hurdle because they're younger. But the distribution is still bad, right?
They're skating Brown minutes. I mean, these are Brown note minutes. These are minutes that we would freak out, because it's like, if you feel this player is useful at all, which we didn't with Brown, why skate him at all?
Yeah.
And yet you're saying this about Ryan, who has been great. You got Suomela, who's been just fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, the Sharks spent a lot of time on the power play in this game, and that's a part of it, right? 4 to 5 minutes for some of these players is coming from power play time, and that is what it is. But then the team also spent 4-ish minutes on the penalty kill.
Yep.
And that's a place where you have an opportunity to ramp down minutes on a Vlasic, ramp down minutes on a Braun, ramp down minutes on a Pavelski, ramp down minutes on a Carlson, ramp down minutes on et cetera, and ramp up some minutes for some of the younger guys. I mean, Goodrow, to the positive, Goodrow got 2 minutes on the PK here. Sorensen got 2 minutes. Chartier got almost 2 minutes. Carlson got 2 minutes. But there's Hurdle sitting at 2 minutes, and these other guys too. And you cannot convince me that you couldn't distribute some of these PK minutes to Suomela. It's just an example, right?
Well, also, this is pure eye test. I haven't looked into this, but I feel like Melker Karlsson commits penalties. He commits more penalties than he draws. And possibly, Kane actually draws a lot of penalties, but I think Kane also is probably one of our more.
It's probably an even trade with Kane.
Yeah. So why put players who are at risk of causing penalties into a PK? 5 versus 4 is bad. 5 versus 3 is you never want to face it. And a competent team will score on a 5 versus 3. So why put a guy out there who is at risk to make a bad situation worse, instead of just letting him specialize as a role playing forward into power play time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Yeah, I'm trying to find if I can Carlson's sort of penalty differential. And
you would love for this to just validate all our dislike for him. Just
no,
be
I
like,
mean,
oh,
again,
and look,
like
he also draws 1.2 penalties every game.
I mean, my main issue with Carlson is he's an expensive mediocrity who doesn't fit with this team in the long term, and so that is an opportunity being lost to develop a non-expensive mediocrity, right?
Yeah.
So I'll have to dig into that, at some other point. So let's use, the Sharks end up winning this game, which it's good. Yay, Sharks! You beat the Predators, and you turned around a not so great, possession position, and also a deficit of 2 goals on the road. Outplayed a team in the third period. Got some bounces. Had a strong power play performance. We finally saw Burns in the slot. All good stuff.
Hey, and we just gotta say, Dylan had an amazing goal.
Yeah, that Dylan goal was one for the highlight reels, and Dylan, I think, is what did I sent you a tweet about this. He's like 4th among active defensemen on shorthanded goals right now.
Yep.
Which is mind blowing.
So that Dylan goal is amazing. Now let's get to the Dylan goal in the Carolina game.
Well, before we say that, one thing we did see in this Predators game, along with sort of the weird shifting of players, was also some changing of lines when Peter DeBoer started quote unquote coaching in the second and third period. And it appears that whatever happened during those line changes had an impact on DeBoer's perspective on where this team was. It could be some measure of health, we don't know, but we saw some changes going into the Hurricanes game. Primarily, Rourke Chartier, who again I thought had played very well, ended up drawing out of the lineup to the benefit of young Dylan Gambrell, who would center in the Hurricanes game, Carlson and Goodrow. And I think, most of the educated fan base would have preferred to see Melker Karlsson fall out of the lineup over Chartier, which does mean you're playing 2 centers on the 4th line. But as we've seen with this Sharks team, they don't really care about the position you were drafted at, and expect centers to be able to play wing. And that's not unreasonable, I think.
Nope.
Regardless, we also saw changes in the defensive pairings. So Karlsson fell down the lineup to pair up with Dylan, which meant that Braun moved up to pair with Vlasic, seemingly like a response to the fact that Karlsson at even strength and paired with Vlasic hasn't been what I think the team has expected him to be.
My difficulty with that perspective is it unless it's based on anything other, he hasn't scored 30 goals yet. I can't even wrap my head around it, because you now have a defensive pairing that was doing phenomenal work. I mean, we saw them out on power plays and penalty kills, which was not good. But 5 versus 5, they were great. The Vlasic defensive line suddenly became this active, offensively scary thing without really losing any of its defensive elements. You were willing to be less offensively charged with Braun versus Vlasic because you knew you just had this backstop pairing. Well, we had that backstop pairing that could also drive play and literally carry the play up the ice to create scoring chances. But somehow that wasn't okay for a long-term investment. And I don't know, we're not to any sort of large enough sample size of seeing this team play to draw meaningful conclusions. And the pairing of Vlasic and Karlsson was successful. It just wasn't producing goals yet. And I mean, Burns scored his first goal this week. So why are we so unwilling to wait for Karlsson to just start lighting up? And let's face it means Vlasic's probably going to score a lot more goals. I think Vlasic should pass more, shoot less. I see Vlasic with a bunch of shots in a game. I think, those are shots Karlsson could have taken.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. And then you got Chartier, who we had a fourth line. We had an active and offensively productive and, possession positive fourth line that also had Goodrow and Carlson on it. So why take out the piece that's, carrying that line, keeping that line together? And lose Goodrow. I would prefer to see Melker go, but you could sit Goodrow, and I could understand that.
Well, except, again, like Goodrow in some situations is playing just as much on the penalty kill as Carlson is. So really it's hard to understand, where this decision to play one or the over the other really comes from, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, unless the players are like blackmailing DeBoer to not put them on a penalty kill, I don't see this weird relationship with DeBoer has with players who I guess are trusted enough to be on the PK, because he has lots of really defensively talented players. He can trust more of them.
Yeah, so let's talk about this game in a little bit more detail. So this game started out pretty positively for the Sharks, with a really strong first period in which the Sharks carried the play against a team that is just as good at carrying play as the Sharks tend to be. And
the first period was just awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And the Sharks ended up with 2 goals. Now, they put Dell in some difficult spots a couple of times, and this game could have been 2-2. It could have been 5-0 Sharks, because the Sharks also had a couple of really good opportunities that Coach Schur and Hurdle sort of booted, let's just say. But, Dell played well, and I felt like on the other end, I don't feel like Mrazek played poorly. And the Sharks went into the intermission looking like, they were not head and shoulders above Carolina, but they were the better possession team, which, you're on the road. That's an accomplishment.
I thought this was going to be the game where we just took whatever we had found in the third period against Nashville and just carried it forward. I thought, oh my God, here comes the 10-goal game that I've been waiting for. And then the second period happened.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. The second period, that happened. So the Sharks were, if you want to talk about shots, they were outshot 13-4 in that second period. If you want to talk about scoring chances, they gave up 15 scoring chances in that period. They spent some time on the penalty kill, which didn't help, and they gave up eight high danger scoring chances versus gaining only 1 themselves. They were up, however, thanks to a power play and a little bit of luck and a great passing play from Coach Schur to Hurdle, up 3-1 partway through this period, and then, dear readers, listeners, Brendan Dillon, everybody.
Oh boy!
You want to talk about that play?
I think I need to go back and see it again. It was the McGinn goal, right? Because, I think the only word that really applies is clusterfuck. Right. Dillon skates it across the front of the goal, runs into Dell, ties up a stick, and leaves the whole net open.
Well, so speaking of that criticism that some folks have levied against Erik Karlsson for not playing particularly well yet this season for the Sharks, that play starts because Erik Karlsson kind of just shoots that puck around the boards from one half board, and Dillon is there and interprets that as a pass, and it doinks off of him, and he chases it, and then he runs into Dell, and then oops, the youngest and I guess sort of most talented McGinn, which isn't saying much because you don't have to be very talented to be the most talented McGinn, it capitalizes and buries that goal while poor Dell is face down in his own crease wondering what just hit him.
So your point is Dillon should have realized he had Pavelski up the boards behind him, and he should have let the puck go, which was a really smart breakout pass by Karlsson that Dillon basically took to our own net.
I mean, I don't know if I have difficulty in this situation knowing if Karlsson should be aware that Dylan is in between him and that pass and not attempt it, or if Dylan should be aware that when a puck is heading towards him at the speed of light, it's probably not a pass intended for him.
So I don't think Karlsson's pass works if Dylan isn't there as maybe he'll take it. And so, Carolina shouldn't shift all the way over to Pavelski. They still have to keep to the middle of the ice. So Dylan still has the important role of moving to the puck, but letting it pass for Pavelski, or like shuffling it along if he could somehow get his stick to add velocity to that. Not take the puck to our net and tie up our goalie.
Yeah,
I mean that's a great play if you can somehow avoid goalie interference, to do to the other team.
So this isn't to say that the Sharks, didn't deserve to be scored on when they were outshot, outchanced, out whatever in this period.
Oh, yeah.
But with that goal and then with the following goal where Vander Kane tries to make an ill-advised pass across his own zone and it ends up back in possession of Carolina, and then whoops, that puck is in the net. It is to say that the Sharks are only tied 3-3 in this game because of mistakes they made.
Yep.
And you don't. Sometimes you want to. Sometimes you will end up winning a game where you just get destroyed in possession after you have a lead. Again, this could, Carolina's efforts here in the second period can partly go down to that score effects idea, right? Because the Sharks were up 2-0 and then 2-1, and then 3-1 up 3-1, right?
So, with what you've seen of our team so far, what lead do you think we need to push for before we sort of do that relax and more neutral zone defense style that causes score effects to happen?
Right.
How many goals do we need before we allow the play that starts score effects?
There is no lead in the NHL where you should sit back. Period. In my opinion, you got to that lead by playing a particular way, and you should play the entire game with that intensity. But with a lead, you should roll your lines more, right? And put guys in positions that they might not otherwise be in. And all of that is to say that you shouldn't be playing a guy only 8 minutes like they did with Dylan Gambrell. You should probably be giving a guy like Joachim Ryan more minutes than he got in this game, and on and so forth, right? So again, theme of this is, even if you were getting shelled positionally, as the Sharks were in the second period and beyond, you have a lead. You need to be thinking about the rest of the season and maybe distribute your minutes a bit, fella.
So basically what you're saying is, once you have a lead on another team, you need to start treating your top players' minutes as though you're taking minutes from the next game.
I think so.
So you start giving your younger guys minutes because you don't want to eat up the good minutes from the next game.
Look, I mean, even in a game, look, it's a long season, and every individual win matters relatively little compared to getting to the postseason with some health. And Brent Burns played 27 minutes in this game. Karlsson played 25. Pavelski played 20. Vlasic 23, Couture 20. Granted, Hertl got hurt and stopped playing after about 12 minutes. Gambrell is sitting there at 8, and you put him in the lineup for a reason.
Yep.
That reason probably was not to only play him for 8 minutes. Right?
Well, to be fair, he was not good in those 8 minutes.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you whether he was good or bad. You know why I can't tell you that? Because I only saw him for 8 friggin' minutes.
Point.
And not enough situations. Was he as good as Chartier? No. Chartier is a more experienced, older player, or slightly older, not significantly older. And that's actually the real tragedy about Gambrell, is he's actually like 3 months younger, something like that, than Chartier. So I entered this game deeply frustrated with the play decisions and splitting up. Karlsson and Dylan didn't look good the whole way together, and that's to be expected. They haven't played together. They haven't practiced together. Now you go on the road and put 2 guys who haven't practiced together in a game against a good team. Seriously, what the fuck?
Yep.
There's really no other way to put it. You go on the road against a very good team, and you take out one of the guys who's been playing well, so that you can take a look at a rookie and then only play him 8 minutes. What the fuck? You're taking guys who are injured. Clearly, they said with Hurdle, he's been hurt and he re-aggravated his injury. And the game before this, you play him 18 minutes. What the fuck?
Yep. And I mean, there you go. If you have a guy who's nursing an injury, you press box him for this game and you go, you know what? We might lose this because Hurdle's sitting, but I'd much rather have Hurdle winning a game in June than, getting injured in a game in October.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you end up having to do exactly what you had to do in the Carolina game anyways, except now you're doing it short benched.
Yep. And this game was exasperating on many levels, and the Sharks got a point out of it, so we've got that to sort of be happy about. But they just, got utterly shellacked through the second and third period. Short man, both through injury and stupidity. Poorly paired up, through stupidity. And this is just a game that DeBoer earned the loss start to finish. But of course, the narrative coming out of this game wasn't that it was coaching that led to these problems. It was that Erik Karlsson is not good. And that's what really frustrates me, because
that's ridiculous.
If you look at the metrics, Karlsson has not scored, right? Fine. That's true. But doesn't mean that he's not being effective where he's shooting from, how he's getting the puck out of the zone, and that's the real disconnect, right? And you've got members of our esteemed media who don't understand advanced stats and don't understand that the eye test is as vulnerable to problems as any poorly analyzed stat can be. Idiotically putting dumb stuff out into the community that laps it up, and that's frustrating too.
So I'm curious because I look at Burns' performance and I look at Karlsson's performance.
Yep.
And if you were to give me no stats, you were just to show me highlights of each player from all the games up to this point, I would say, oh, Karlsson must be leading. Karlsson must be the best player. And then
without looking at the goals,
without looking at the stats at all.
Oh, okay.
And then you see 2 goals, 10 assists for Burns.
Right.
And then I sort of look at the other top producers on our team, and I sort of think, okay, how often is Burns with those top producers? How often is Karlsson?
Right.
And I feel like I would be really curious to see what the actual shifting is for how often they're together. I feel like Karlsson does more with less. I think he's getting shifted into more with the bottom 6. I don't think you see him with those sort of spark plug players as often. I don't think you see Couture and LeBanc with Karlsson as often as you see Burns with them.
I know that folks have looked at sort of their zone starts, and I do believe that one takeaway is that Burns is starting almost primarily in the offensive zone, which obviously is an advantage to a guy like Burns offensively. I'm not sure anybody's drawn out Karlsson's stats to that regard, and I would bet that Karlsson is starting in the defensive zone far more. But I think if you look at historically what DeBoer does, that's because Vlasic starts in the defensive zone. He almost never gets an offensive zone start. And, perhaps, putting Karlsson on with Dylan was an attempt to get Karlsson going because he'd get more offensive zone starts that way. Maybe that was the thinking there. If that's the thinking, I can kind of at least get it. So I'm glad you brought this up. But I suspect that both Karlsson and Burns get tons of time with the high quality players because they just get tons of ice time, period. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess I'm more at the targeted pairings.
So here's the other thing to think about. I also think that if you look at and I'd have to dive into this, but I believe that in terms of zone starts, the third and fourth line start or at least the fourth line, I think, gets its starts mostly in the offensive zone.
Yep.
In which case, if they're probably actually playing with Burns more than they are with Karlsson, if that is true. But I'd have to dig into that, and I'm not sure that that's true. So,
but yeah, I just have to keep going back to seeing Karlsson and Vlasic together and seeing them, like, just watching the play and knowing, oh, Karlsson and Vlasic are out. Look at them doing stuff. And then I watched the Carolina game with Vlasic and Braun, and I look and I watch our forwards play, and then the puck goes to our defensive end. Somebody gets it. Somebody, shuffles it around, goes back to the forwards. And then our defensive pair comes back on that I can actually watch and recognize, because Vlasic and Braun just vanish when they're playing together. They're effective.
Yep.
They get the job done. They shut down the other team, but they completely vanish from the eye test.
Well, I'm not sure that they do anymore together completely shut down the other team, because Braun has gotten a little bit slower and older and isn't as good on the if you look at, just for example, the Carolina game, Braun is one of the 4 worst players possession-wise relative to the rest of the team. And you won't be surprised at the other 3, Gambrell, Karlsson, and Goodrow. And again, I just want to say really quickly that in an individual game, possession stats don't really mean that much, because they're just a record of what happened. It's across long terms that possession stats can give you some predictions as to how well a team will do. But it does mean that in a particular game, they just got owned. And Braun is down there, right? Ryan is the next worst defenseman, largely because, he doesn't get a lot of opportunities on offense, and neither does Braun. That's part of it too. So anyway,
it was really hard seeing Gambrell in this game. Just finding him and trying to see him do anything good with the puck was difficult.
It was a terrible, stupid decision to put that guy in Carolina and then only play him for 8 minutes. Terrible, stupid decision. There's no other way to put it. You're an idiot, DeBoer. Please stop being.
And you slowed down. You made our best defensive pairing slower.
That too.
Like you basically, and the way you look at it, you, instead of having, each of our lines get a tiny bit slower, you made one of our lines significantly slower, and therefore our entire team slowed down, because they both have just this anchor pairing behind them. So, good job. And Carolina is a pretty fast team, so doubly good.
So to kind of wrap this up, we have no idea what the Sharks lineup is going to look like this afternoon, I think, at this point, because we don't know what the defensive pairings are going to end up being after the debacle in Carolina. We don't know whether Hertl will be in the lineup, but we have to assume he won't.
Do you want him to be?
No, I mean, I want Hertl, if he's not feeling well, to rest until he's feeling better, for sure.
Agreed.
There are 2 guys that the Sharks are, I think, carrying still on the forward roster, that could draw in. One of them obviously is Chartier, and probably the guy who should. And then I think the other guy they're carrying, I guess they're not carrying another forward. I think they're carrying Simek. Yes, on the defensive side, they're carrying Simek. So we will definitely see Chartier back in, I think.
Well, so I think you're about to say what I was going to say.
No, the real question is what the defensive pairings will be. Will Vlasic and Karlsson be back?
I don't know. We are back to the point of who knows what the hell he's going to do, but DeBoer will just, figure it out at the beginning of the game and, throw it in the blender, 20 minutes in.
And we'll probably see top line Melker Karlsson again, because DeBoer has no imagination whatsoever. So,
well, honestly, I'll take top line Melker Karlsson if it gets our third line back.
Ugh. No, it's terrible.
I mean, I just, you have Kane, Pavelski, and Karlsson, and at least our third line gets to shine again, and we get to see more Scandinavian crazy one-on-one breakouts.
All right, let's leave the Sharks with that kind of optimism, or leave our fans with that kind of optimism. So I'm going to skip the 3 stars of the week because that's Alex's thing, and I think it's silly. So you can find us on at circlingthecup.com. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on social media at circlingthecup.com on Twitter, or facebook.com/circlingthecup. Twitter is largely me. Facebook is largely Alex posting naked upper body jumbo pictures when they're available. I'm not sure whether we will have a podcast this week because I will be busy Friday to Sunday, but we'll see if Alex and Colin pick up the slack or not. We have 3 games this week regardless. One today at 5 p.m. against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. I will never stop calling them that.
Good.
And then following up from there, we will have a game on Tuesday with the Rangers coming into San Jose, and then the Columbus Blue Jackets and good old Torts will be in on Thursday visiting the Sharks. So 3 games to look forward to, plus, depending on when or if there's a podcast, maybe a 4th with the Flyers coming into play on the 3rd on Saturday. So,
well, you do know what great thing starts up at the end of this coming week.
Uh-oh. No, I don't.
I start up my 7-month of parental leave, so
nice.
I'll be watching games live quite often.
Nice, yeah. So we have talked about on this end potentially doing some live casts of games, but logistically, I'm not sure if or how that will work. But as we figure that out, we will let you all, our listeners, know. So
there's also the problem of the time delay between the watching. So anytime the 3 of us are all chatting to each other, talking to each other while watching a game.
Yeah, you're usually a good minute behind us. So
yeah, so I get to have Alice and Ben go, oh, and then I wait a few moments to see what awesome or terrible thing happened.
Yeah. That's got to be frustrating. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you again in episode 106 at some point, and go Sharks.
Go Sharks.
All right.